Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Teens for Business. Today, we'll be reflecting on our interview with Professor Tyler Wry, a professor of management at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Jackie.
I'm Kylan.
I'm Ivan.
And I'm Jack.
Thank you guys all so much for joining me today. So, my conversation with Professor Wry was extraordinarily enlightening, and I was able to learn about both hybrid social ventures and just that area as a whole, but also his own experiences in business. So, speaking of personal experiences in business, let's talk a little bit about that for us. So, have you had any business ventures or anything similar to that? What were they like? Do they align with Professor Tyler Wry's topics of a hybrid social venture?
Yeah, for me, I think in terms of hybrid social ventures, what my organization that I started is called Bay Area Youth Basketball, and we basically coach basketball for elementary school students, and we try to provide lessons for kids of all backgrounds. And part of the social aspect is, like our classes are very cheap. We do charge money. It's not like a full nonprofit. Coaches, we do get paid, but we try to make classes very cheap and accessible for all types of students. But like Professor Tyler Wright said, it's kind of hard to find the correct balance between like a for-profit and a nonprofit company. And we're somewhere in the middle, but I think we're still trying to also like find the right balance that is like a hybrid venture.
Yeah. For me, obviously, we do have the business venture I did have was EduWe Connect, which everybody here should also have. And it's probably considered a hybrid social venture because we do have to like finance, but we do have to do it as a social venture. So I guess in that way it's hybrid. But it's it kind of, yeah, so it just like aligns with that because you have to finance whatever social initiative you do have in some sort of way, but also maintain that kind of nonprofit status you have.
Yeah, for me, I'm also involved in EduWe Connect, and that's the only I guess hybrid social venture that I'm involved in. I would consider it hybrid because there's we had to make a lot of trade-offs when we were thinking of how to make or model which should deliver a social impact towards high school students and or other students that we plan to help. But also we have to maintain the financial aspect so we can keep maintaining running our social business, because as Professor Wry said, if you don't have any the financials to back your business, then you won't have any social impact.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, for mentioning that last part. I thought that part was really interesting, and it's true. You can't, if you're doing a hybrid social venture, you can't just completely drop one side and be like, yeah, we don't really care about financials. We just want to change the world. Because in order to do a lot of that stuff, you do need to have financials to hire employees, make the products you want to make or the services and things like that. But for some of my own personal experiences, so I'm part of Paramount Learning, and so there a lot of what we do is looking at how can we best provide more opportunities and resources to students all around the world. And there it's not fully a nonprofit because a lot of what we do is inviting guest speakers, inviting panelists to come talk to students from around the world. And a lot of them are willing to come for free because they're oh, we want to inspire some kids around the world, especially in some non-US countries that aren't as privileged as we are. But some panelists, because they are very professional, they are that is what they do for their jobs, so that we do give them a fee, things like that. So it's not fully nonprofit in that sense, but a lot of what we do is kind of hybrid financials. We don't make money for just making money for the sake of it, but it's more so how do you invest it back into your company, which is I think a really big thing of what Professor Wright was also talking about. If you can't make money as a whole, then your business, no matter what, is not going to be sustainable. So I thought that was really interesting. Okay, so next question. If you've already started your business or something of that sort, what would you say was the most difficult part in getting it started? So whether that be thinking of the idea, whether that be registering things, whether that be actually starting your operations up, things like that. What do you think was the most difficult part?
I think part of it being difficult, just like Professor Wry said, it was a lot about like your experience and your knowledge. Like you need a baseline of knowledge for anything to be successful. And when you're just starting out, of course, you're going to have less of it than somebody who's been running companies for like many years, right? So I guess when you're first starting out, a lot of the difficult aspect of it is just that the lack of experience. So you're going to make mistakes. And I guess specifically, like trying to find customers or trying to find students for whatever business you have, that's a hard part because people don't know what your company does, don't know what you guys do. So just getting the word out about what you do, especially if it's like a social enterprise, if it's a nonprofit where you can offer like free classes, it's going to be a little bit easier. But yeah, just when you're starting out and the lack of experience, when you just started your business, that's probably the most difficult part.
Yeah, I agree with Kaiwin. Like talking about like what Kaiwin does, I also have a nonprofit called Little Grass Foundation, and in my opinion, it's a little bit less than a hybrid. It's not less. It's not a hybrid social venture because we don't really have a financing aspect of our organization. It's just a plain nonprofit. Our classes are super cheap, and coaches are volunteers, stuff like that. So we don't really have a financing part. It's just a social initiative. And in that organization, I think the hardest part was to get the organization into like people they get people to know about it, right? Because when you get started, you don't have a lot of people who are signing up for classes, and you don't have a lot of people who are willing to volunteer with your organization because, well, one, you're not, what do you say, registered to give hours and the presidential volunteer award, and so people don't really have the initiative to join the classes. And two, like, you don't have any students and you don't have any sports. Like, we started off, it was just volleyball and basketball, and then now we have volleyball, basketball, soccer in many different locations. So the hardest part is definitely getting coaches and getting students and getting your organization into people uh, in people's minds, because once you get that in, it's going to be much easier, because as there's more people in your organization, it's going to be more popular and easier to expand uh, in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those points. Like, definitely starting off the business, thinking of like an idea could definitely be like really challenging, and also like getting the word out there that you're doing a social initiative, also really challenging. For me, I think just a little bit of different dimension. I think for me, like for Edu We Connect, no, we did like a lot of pitching competitions to get our word out there, but during that process, we had to make several like really like complicated and like really hard decisions that Professor Wright like did talked about. And like when we have to like make those decisions, we have to like consider the trade-off. And like those like decisions I actually were like really hard to make, but they were necessary to determine like our future of like what our plan could be. And those decisions required like a lot of time, a lot of like different modeling to make. And I feel like me personally, when I had to make those decisions, it was like really hard for me. It took hours, took days to like think about it and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think for Paramount Learning, one of the biggest issues, well, not issues, but like one of the biggest difficulties, I would say, is when you're starting it up, like, yes, you have your idea, like, yes, you have you and your own like little operations, things like that, but you also have to like find team members, and you also have to like Ivan said, find people who would benefit from your service. And so a lot of doing that was like making sure, like trying to involve people. And I think that's a big time commitment on what you want to do, especially like as high school students. Time is not something we have an abundance of. Like, there's a lot of other things that we have to do. But like at the beginning of Paramount Learning, when I was just setting it up, I remember like spending like 20 hours a week during school days just to like, well, school weeks during just like figure out, how do you start this operation up? How do you like have people join your cause as like a staff member? How do you get people to know about your like venture to benefit from it? And so I thought that was particularly difficult, not in the sense of like it was like a lot of brain power per se, but it was a lot of like effort and dedication and obviously thinking about like how do you like strategies of how do you get people to join. So I thought that was like particularly difficult, but also like when you actually get like at a certain point, that kind of stops a little bit because you've built it up so high, and then now you have like this machine that can like run on its own. You just have to like oil it occasionally. So that definitely was there, like that part of like how do you build up that machine so it can run functionally. I thought that was particularly difficult, and also like spreading the word out, like Ivan said, like you have to tell people that it exists, right? Like obviously they're going to benefit from it, but like they can't benefit from it if they don't know it exists. So that was one thing. Okay, so next, would you, so I know like not all of us have like started a hybrid social venture. We've started things like on the side that are like more nonprofit style or like, you know, on the other side of things, but would you be interested in starting a true to definition hybrid social venture, or would you rather just do like a nonprofit or like a for-profit company? And of course, like everyone's answers are going to be different here depending on like what you and your passions are. So
Yeah, I think a hybrid social venture is probably the best of both worlds, but it's also probably the hardest one to truly make successful. It's just kind of like Professor Wry, you have to find the balance where basically the social aspect and the for-profit aspect fit together seamlessly. And right, like for teenagers, it's going to be easier to just focus on one part of it and dedicate all of your time and effort to making that part the best it can be. Like if you're making a nonprofit, dedicating your resources to just to your organization so it can help people, and you don't have to worry about like the part where you have to make money as well. So I just think that especially for high schoolers, making like a hybrid social venture is definitely going to be more difficult. But if you have the expertise, you have the experience, and you want to make one, I think it is the best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely. In my opinion, like I remember hearing the podcast and saying like you have to first find the problem, and then you find whether or not a hybrid social venture fits to solve that problem. And in my opinion, just like Kywan said, hybrid social venture is the best of both worlds. However, it also brings like the difficulties of both worlds, because now you have difficulties of for-profit organizations, and you also have like difficulties of the nonprofit organization. So yeah, just like Kywan said, it's probably going to be on the harder side of getting up and running, especially on financing your social initiative. And but like for high schoolers, I think it's a great way to dip your hands into the business world. Because first you have solving a social initiative, which is already like good in itself, but you also have like that financial aspect of marketing and finding people, getting people to know your organization, stuff like that. And it's like this a great way to experience what the business world is like, because once you actually like get MBA or whatever, then it's too late to actually like, oh, I don't know much about business world because I haven't done anything. So like, I think it's a great way for high schoolers to get to know everything before like they actually go in the field.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that for high schoolers, like a hybrid social venture would be like really, it would be like a good start, but also be like super challenging because they have, and on top of their high school life, they'll have the finances and like the social aspect of like a hybrid social venture to manage. Like if you don't have enough of the financials, then well, your social impact's not going to be very limited based on how much you can spend and allocate. But also, I can definitely see like hybrid social ventures being like trial and error, a little bit of a method that Professor Wry talked about. Like it as like a teenager, like with like limited experience and limited like networking, it could be like it. It's absolutely okay to make like small failures because there's not too much of like a risk. You're not going to lose like that much money as long as you like manage everything like correctly. But it as Ivan did like talk about, like once you like grow up, receive your MBA, I was saying, oh, I want to do this like business, maybe. And then when you start like another hybrid social venture, maybe the stakes are a lot higher. And so you can definitely use the hybrid social venture that you maybe like formed as like a high schooler to to like maybe like guide potentially what you could do in the future. So I think hybrid social ventures would definitely be the hardest of just like a for-profit or nonprofit or hybrid social venture at a young age. But in the future, I feel like even if it will be more challenging, I feel like it will be less challenging as it is for like high school than it is for like people in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree about like the experience part, like whether or not you want a hybrid social venture, whether or not it's just like a pure nonprofit or a pure for-profit company. I think it's like important that you get experience, like if you know that business or like entrepreneurship or even something that's like remotely intertwined with this field is something you want to do in your future as a high schooler, like a current high schooler. I think like starting something is going to be really important and like having that experience, because even if like you don't particularly, let's say like even if you don't want to like be an entrepreneur yourself, like you might be working for like a startup or you might be working for a company like that. So like having that experience is very important. And then this is also something I think Professor Wry mentioned in our interview, and he said that you kind of like don't really start off by thinking, okay, I want to do a social venture or a hybrid social venture. You start off like with looking at the solutions. You start out by like looking at the problems and thinking like what you can do for those problems. And I think that was like actually a really interesting point. But if we were just to go and like talk about specifically like hybrid social ventures or for profit and like nonprofit, I think that it's actually a really great way to like start off at, like, because you can get both the benefits um of both sides, right? And also like you also get to learn, if that's like the first thing or like first or second thing that you start off with, you get to learn that both sides are both very important and you can't just like take off one side for the other side. Like you have to balance it out. Like obviously there's going to be trade-offs, but you can't just say like, yeah, we don't want to care about financials for this, or like the vice versa of that. And so I think like starting a hybrid social venture as like one of your first pieces, even though it might be a little bit more difficult, it's still like a very valuable experience. And I think it's like you get to learn a lot from it and gain a lot of experience from that as well. So that's definitely a plus side. Okay, so next question. In your opinion, what skills or like character traits do you think are most important for aspiring teenage entrepreneurs? And this could be like personal characteristics, like soft skills, or also like hard, more technical skills.
Yeah, I think Professor Wry mentioned like that if you can't fail when you're doing something, that you can't learn anything either. So I guess a skill that's most important would probably be like grit or perseverance. I just think even there's going to be like bumps in the road, but you just got to stick with it. And Professor Wry also mentioned how you want to set yourself up to kind of fail in low risk situations. And so it's kind of like when things really matter, you're prepared for anything. And yeah, just being able to persevere through like the obstacles, because it's starting any organization, there's going to be so many obstacles in front of you. You just got to keep going. I think that's one of the most important things about starting any type of organization, nonprofit, for-profit organization, or a hybrid social venture. You just got to persevere.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle. Like the professor said, like if you're gonna fail, which inevitably people are, especially for us teenagers who are trying to establish an organization, so to fail small, right? I feel that was a good point. And additionally, feel like on like the emotional side or personality side, um, definitely like don't be one of those people who Professor Rice said like they step on other people's neck to put themselves ahead. Um, and I think one of the traits that are beneficial is like a leader, being a good leader, not like just any leader, being a good and compassionate leader who emphasizes working together as a team, right? Teamwork. If like people who do have these traits, in my opinion, wouldn't step on other people and be extremely selfish in that certain way. And in order to have a successful organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for profit or even a joint social venture, um, it's like if you don't put the company and the people ahead of yourself, then inevitably it's going to fail. But even if you have the strategy of failing small, it's gonna just it's gonna fail in so many small ways. It's gonna become a big way, and definitely a major point is to not be extremely selfish and put other people down.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There has to be like a certain level of like interdependence among like team members in like a small like hybrid venture or just a small business in general. Because like if you're not interdependent of each other, and instead you're like, oh, I want this thing, it's just business, but it's not social, it's just business, like what Professor Wry said. But well, it's like it's something towards like the self for another person. So I just like with Professor Wry's experiences, that can like deter people from like working there. They could just like leave the company. I also think another skill or character trait that are very important for aspiring teenage entrepreneurs is like a sort of flexibility and open-mindedness. Because like if one solution doesn't work, like after like a trial and error, if one solution that you really thought could work ends up like there has to be like a certain like flaw in that solution that makes that solution ineffective. The teenagers like and just business people in general, like they have to like be flexible and open-mindedness to like switch and like consider another solution that could potentially also like solve the pain point. And also like flexibility and open-mindedness can also like help with like decision making, especially when there's like big decisions to be made, big trade-offs to consider, and just a lot of stuff when you're like developing a hybrid social venture or just any nonprofit or business in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think also another point I think is really important is being a leader, but also doing that with kindness and like thinking about your team, your community, things like that. Because no matter what role you're in, like obviously if you're the founder and CEO, of course you're gonna have to be like a leader, right? But also if you're like a team member, you still like should have those traits of leadership and being able to like, help gather your team around, because no matter what position you're in, you still have to like do those essential tasks. And even if you're just a team member, or even if you're just, someone else in that company who's not so much of a leadership role yet, you always like, you guys are working towards the same goal, assuming that you're in like one of those structures. But if you're working towards the same goal, then you should be able to like have those skills of whoever's on top per se. So I think that's like really important. But as I think someone mentioned, like if you're able to do that with kindness and compassion and like be a team player while also being a leader, that's like really important, because not only are you like trying to achieve your goals, but also you're able to help the people around you in your team also like rise up and achieve those goals. Because if it's just you and you're just like barreling forward and like all your other team members don't like you, that is not going to be good for your like venture, whatever you're doing. So if you're able to like have this community mindset and you're able to like make your team members like work together in collaboration and lead them as well, then that's like going to yield the best results. And I think that's really important, because no matter what like kind of venture you're doing, it's really, really hard to do it as a single person. Because if you're going to like, whether it's a business, whether it's like a nonprofit, whether it's something in the middle, like if you're able to have more than just one person working on it as like a staff member, then you're going to have like much better results, a better like reach. And that's like really important. So like having team members and being able to work with them, I think is really, really important for like aspiring teenage entrepreneurs, and something you're going to have to learn anyways in the future. So you might as well get started while you still are like in the more trying ages. But yeah, so do you guys have any general takeaways? And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I took away, thought was really interesting from Professor Wry's interview, was when he mentioned that you have to like fail small, and like you start by failing small. Like you don't just like put $2 million into your venture that's your first time and be like, yes, I hope everything's going to work out. Like you have to like set yourself to like to fail small in a way, because failure is almost inevitable. Like he mentioned that the first time entrepreneurs like success rate is very, very extraordinarily small. And so the first few times that you do it, like you shouldn't be investing like every single penny you have. Like, of course, you need to like believe in yourself, but at the same time, like be realistic and like have some more experience before you put your all into it. And I thought that was actually really interesting. So that was one of my biggest takeaways. And I think that's also not to say like to not put your all into it the first time around. I think it's more so saying like you should put as much passion, as much like hard work into it, but don't put every single one of your resources into the first time you do it.
Yeah. For me, I think it's just that what Professor Wright talked about with like knowledge, how knowledge lets you see things that other people can't. So you kind of have to build this knowledge base to be successful in anything, right? And I think part of that knowledge is that when you're trying to start a company or like a hybrid social venture, like to be specific, like once you identify that problem that you kind of want to solve, you need to kind of talk to the people that that problem is affecting to build that knowledge about how you're going to best come up with a solution that's going to help them, because this problem isn't really affecting, it might not be affecting you. So if you're trying to solve a issue that is affecting real people, you have to talk to those people and build that knowledge base up. And this isn't just for starting businesses. To be successful in anything, you kind of need that knowledge base. You need to learn. That's why we're in school first, right? You need to build that knowledge base. And I think that point that he made really stuck with me.
Yeah, I agree a bit. Like, I love how the way he puts it. Like, you want to have a minimum viable product and make sure to test the waters out before you put everything in, right? Just like Jackie said, like, even though you should go all in emotionally and personally, you shouldn't financially go all in, because in with some shape or form, it's going to fail. So when you do fail in a small way. But also, I really love how, well, I don't know, I really remember how he mentioned that his early business experience were kind of hindered by others who are willing to put others down and put themselves forward. Um, in that way, kind of like shows that the business world isn't all like all happy. Everyone works together greatly, stuff like that. It's like people who shouldn't be there are there, and just for people who, like us teenagers, young people who are wanting start a startup or for-profit startup, or even a hybrid venture, like to be aware of these type of people who are very probably more common than we think, and get learning good business leadership traits, right? Putting the business and the team in front of your own personal beliefs and personal thoughts. So I think that's a really valuable thing for us teenagers to learn before we actually like go, if we do actually want to go start a for-profit organization.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been mentioned so far. My big takeaway is that like taking like step by step, especially in like the business like world, is like really important when you're starting something. Like first of all, you have to learn as much as you can from like the given resources, like from the internet, from whatever you can find about like just anything about your pain points, about maybe the markets that you're dealing with. That could be really important. And then the second step, like once you've like finalized what the problem is, you have to like prioritize it, and then you work up, you find a few solutions, find the solutions that like that looked best, that probably worked the best, and then the next one, and after that you just like test them out, and then you test them out until you find a problem like in the hybrid social venture that has like a good trade-off between social value and profitability. That like really stuck with me because like it showed like just the business uh it just shows like the business process in general, like starting something like new, starting a new entrepreneurial like adventure. Like a lot of people just go straight to, oh, there's this like I guess a little bit of a business like formula to follow to like get to like a certain way or like a certain like success level of like profitability slash like social impact. Also like you can't like put all your like I don't know what the phrase is, but like if you like prioritize one thing too much and then just completely ignore the other, like if you like completely prioritize the social enterprise but completely lose track of your like money, your social enterprise will also be like super limited because like the financials, like you can't allocate that much. So that also like really stuck with me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of those points. And I thought like the whole discussion with Professor Wry was extraordinarily interesting. And I think I personally learned a lot because, like, as a professor at Wharton, he has a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge about this than I do. So it was really fun to just talk to him about that. So thank you guys all for joining us on this episode of Teens for Business. And if you haven't checked out our interview with Professor Wry that we've been talking about today, make sure to go check that out. Thank you so much.